Hi, Pádraig Lenihan is my name. I'm here interviewing Neasa MacErlean about her biography entitled Telling the Truth is Dangerous. It's a biography of her grandfather, Robert Dudley Edwards, who was for many years Professor of Modern Irish History at University College Dublin and was, so for want of a better phrase, the public intellectual, the German ferreter of his day. Is that why you wrote about him, or is it an act of pietas, family pietas? Yes,
It's I don't think anyone in my family has ever written anything pious. Certainly not Dudley, and certainly not myself on him. I think he would strike me down from the grave if I went down that route, and I don't think anyone would believe me. But the book, I was encouraged to start researching him by his former students and friends. We were meeting in Doheny and Nesbitt's quite often, one of the pubs that he had visited regularly in Dublin, and they were talking about how it was such a shame that no one had written about this fascinating person. And eventually they were all looking at each other as to who would do it, and eventually no one was volunteering, and eventually I was volunteered once or twice, and with great reluctance I started to look into it. And then what happened was I realised that there were enormous issues that he'd been dealing with that had never really come out. And I suppose the most profound issue that he handled was that, as he put it with great irony, Ireland had no history. He discovered this really seriously when he went to study in the Institute of Historical Research in London at the same time as Theo Moody, and the historians there were the greatest historians in the country, and lectures would be given by people who were from other universities as well. This was a part of London University. And they realised with horror that none of these historians knew anything about Irish history because they didn't realise that it had existed. And in fact, when Dudley wrote his PhD, he thanked his supervisor, Canon Claude Jenkins, for having read a significant part of it. And the danger of having no history is enormous. It's as you know, as a military historian, if you have no history, that an accusation can be made that you have no culture, that you're a barbarian. And we're seeing this at the moment, in a sense, with Donald Trump can latch on to the history of Israel, because you don't need to know much in the world to know about how Israel was created. But the history of Gaza, clearly he's swept that out of his mind, and now he's viewing it as a nice piece of real estate. And for small countries, such as Ireland, there's great danger that you can just be swept in and used as a useful asset. And this would have been one of the concerns at the back of Dudley's mind, that Irish history had existed, obviously, as it does in Gaza. Irish history had existed, and it needed to be made known, not just in this country and studied, but everywhere else, so that we'd be taken seriously.
he doesn't sound like a revisionist to me. I mean, I would have thought of him in that light.
Well, that's good. Not everyone does, because it takes an awful long time even to change one's view of an individual's history, let alone to change a country's idea of its own history or of the history of other countries. We're beset by prejudices about ourselves and about our neighbours. And Dudley tried to make the study of history come alive. He got his students to research subjects individually and to stand up and deliver talks on them, which can be much harder than writing an essay, and to defend their opinions, but always based on research. And it was that linking it into the actual evidence, not into myth or into prejudice, which was so distinctive about what Dudley and Theo Moody did.
So it's this hard-nosed scientific approach, evidence-based history.
Exactly, yes, that's right, and that's the kind of history that we have today. You can just see the number of archival institutions that have developed, national archives, and the different universities have their archives, and also you can't really go to a history lecture these days without people telling you a little bit about how they found the documents that support their argument.
Yes. So in the Irish sense of somebody being, I'm sorry if I'm stuck on this, somebody being a revisionist, was he or wasn't he?
Well, Dudley would have said that you just had to go to the documents and to see what they said. So in the there's a pejorative sense in which the word revisionist is used in this country, and that would certainly have been applied to Dudley, and Dudley would have accepted the actual factual part of that description, which was that he went to archives. He was obsessed with archives and was the person who more than anyone else led a 40-year campaign to introduce national archives in this country.
A historian wants to revise. I mean, what's the point in writing if you're saying what everybody else had said? I mean, I'm with you on that.
Yes.
But specifically, did he have an empathy for... I mean, revisionists are often criticised as being, or having been, having no empathy for the colonised. In fact, not recognising that the process between England and Ireland was in any sense colonial, that it was more consensual rather than violence-based and so on. And did Dudley have a feeling for native culture, native sources, Irish?
Oh, absolutely. He'd studied Irish down in the Gaeltacht in Munster for 4 years, and although he didn't have a great pronunciation of Irish, every day he was talking with his wife, sometimes in Irish. His wife was a great Irish speaker, about not just about the Irish language itself, but about that very, very old hidden Ireland and the suffering that there had been, and. He, in fact, as he grew older, he slightly regretted the harshness, possibly, of some of his previous works that had been so much based in fact that they would have seemed that they could have seemed as if the human quality was being squeezed out of them a bit. He thought that he'd overdone that slightly.
Well, to some extent, you're a prisoner of your written sources. I mean,
yeah.
If you're looking at state documents, that's the prism that you can easily become. The prism can become a prison.
Yes, that's right. Later on, actually, one of his he wrote 7 books, and I think the 5th book, which he was in his 60s or 70s when he wrote that, he talks about various other sources of archives, and one of them is you have to think about the great records. So you have the births, deaths, and marriages. He made great connections with the churches about their records, but he also talked about the records of the courtrooms, and he was thinking about people who had left Ireland maybe in the famine. Some of them would have had criminal records, and he writes with great sympathy about how families might not want to look up this kind of history just to find that an ancestor had been found guilty of stealing a loaf of bread and sentenced.
Well, well, we're coming towards the end of our chat now, but I mean, was I correct in speaking of him as a public intellectual, that it wasn't just the classroom stuff or the books and the archives? He engaged.
Oh, he absolutely did. He was he didn't drive a car, actually. He never learnt to drive, so he was forever on the trains and buses, going all around the country, and encouraging local history and speaking to local history groups. And in fact, he was so well known that he was a crossword clue in the Independent one day.
That is fame itself. And he was on RT. Would have been. He was on radio quite a bit, wasn't he?
That's right. He was on radio quite a bit, and also there was a famous television programme called The Professors, in which he and Desmond Williams used to discuss the issues of the day, linking them into history. And of course, Desmond Williams used to smoke a great deal, and you would see their faces looming in and out behind the clouds of smoke.
Wow, those were the days. Speaking as a smoker, is there anything in our chat that you feel we haven't covered that you'd like to bring to highlight?
There's a great deal to say about him. and all of these. He was a controversial figure. He was physically one of these characters that people would recognise as he walked around Dublin, very proud of being a Dubliner and of being an Irishman. So there's you're blessed as a biographer if you have an interesting character to write about. And I think most people who knew him would agree that there weren't that many people who were more striking.
A colourful character and interesting, significant in his time. Okay, Neasa, thanks for sharing with me.
Thank you, Pádraig.